My only son, told me that our big family dinner at the fanciest restaurant in town had been canceled. But then I found him, his wife, and her parents feasting, laughing, and paying for their expensive meal with my money. I stayed hidden in the shadows, my heart pounding in my chest, and made one single phone call to an old friend. I was about to give them the most humiliating public surprise of their lives, because payback, as I was about to show them, was going to be epic. Before I get into the weeds of it all, I'd love to know who I'm talking to out there. It gets a little quiet in this old house, and it's nice to know folks are listening. Do me a favor and let me know in the comments what city or country you're watching from, and what time it is for you right now. It means a lot. Okay, here's how it all started. The day begins at 5:30 a.m. Not because an alarm clock screams at me, but because the ghost of a factory whistle still lives in my bones. For 40 years I worked at the old lumber mill in Oak Ridge, Pennsylvania, shaping wood, feeling its grain and heft. Now at 65, the mill is just a memory, a patch of overgrown weeds by the railroad tracks, but my body keeps the schedule. My joints ache with a familiar rhythmic protest as my feet touch the cool oak floorboards of my home. A home I built with these two hands, plank by plank, back in '83, the year after Carol and I got married. This house isn't grand. Just 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a living room, and my attached workshop. But it's as sturdy as I am. Every beam holds a memory of her laughter. Every nail a story. Carol was the one who drew up the plans on a napkin at a diner, dreaming of a porch where we could watch the thunderstorms roll in. She'd say, "Art, a man's character is like a house. It's not about the fancy trim. It's about a solid foundation." She was the foundation of my life. Now the house is just quiet. Too quiet. Cancer took her from me 4 years ago. It was fast and it was cruel, and it left a silence so deep that sometimes I still strain to hear her humming an old tune in the kitchen, the scent of her baking bread a phantom in the air. For the first year I talked to her. I'd sit on that porch she designed and tell her about my day, about the leaky faucet I'd fixed, and ask her which tie I should wear to church. Slowly, the one-sided conversations faded. The pain didn't get easier exactly. I just got used to the emptiness, the way a sailor gets used to the vast, lonely sea. The emptiness is chased away, at least for a while, in my workshop. That's my sanctuary. The rich, earthy smell of cedar and pine shavings is better than any air freshener money can buy. After I retired, when the silence in the house became too loud, I took up carving. Nothing fancy. Mostly wooden ducks, the kind you see out on Miller's Pond, their heads cocked just so. Each one is different. I spend hours on the feathers, using a special knife to get the little details just right, feeling the wood yield under the pressure. It's honest work. It requires focus. It keeps my hands busy and my mind from wandering to darker places where grief lies in wait. Carol always said I had a gift. "Arthur Miller," she'd say, holding up a freshly sanded decoy, "you don't just carve wood. You find the bird that's already inside it." She was always my biggest fan. Bless her heart. She could find the magic in a simple block of wood. It's a small life, I suppose. Simple. But it was my life and I was content with it. I thought my days would just be this: quiet mornings, coffee as black as tar, and the steady, comforting work in my shop. I thought the drama of life was behind me, but I had no idea a storm was gathering. One that would threaten to tear down everything I had ever built. That storm had a name: Kevin. He's my only son, 42 years old now, a marketing executive for some big company in the city. When he was a boy, he was my shadow. Everywhere I went, from the garden to the hardware store, he was right there behind me, his eyes wide with a kind of innocent admiration that a father treasures more than gold. I remember one summer Saturday, we must have spent 6 hours down at the creek. I taught him how to bait a hook, how to cast his line just right so it landed in the shady spot under the willow tree where the biggest trout hid. He was so patient, so eager to learn. When he finally caught his first fish, a little sunfish no bigger than his hand, the look on his face, it was pure, unadulterated joy. He looked at me like I'd taught him the secrets of the universe. I was his hero then. Then came college. The first in our family to go. Carol and I were so proud we scrimped and saved every penny. We didn't take vacations. We drove our cars until they fell apart. It was all for him, for his future. And it changed him. The city, the fancy degree, the new friends with their trust funds and summer homes, and Tiffany, his wife. She's smart, beautiful, and ambitious, with a smile that never quite reaches her eyes. She works as a paralegal, and her family is what you'd call old money, from the other side of the state. They have a world of country clubs and European vacations, a world so different from mine it might as well be on another planet. And slowly my son moved into that world and left me behind. He never said it outright, of course. Kevin was too polished for that. But I could feel it in 100 small ways. I saw it in the way he'd subtly correct my grammar at the dinner table. The way Tiffany's polite smile would tighten when I'd tell a story about the old days at the mill, as if my past was a charming but slightly embarrassing antique. They'd visit, but the visits felt scheduled. Stiff. An obligation to be checked off a list. He'd look at his watch constantly, talk about a conference call he had to get to. He stopped asking about my carvings. The last one I gave him for Christmas I later saw in his garage, collecting dust behind a set of golf clubs. He stopped asking to go fishing. The connection we had, that easy bond between a father and son, was fraying. It was being replaced by a kind of polite, awkward distance. Now, the only time that distance seemed to shrink was when he needed something. A couple thousand for a down payment on a new SUV last year, because his old one wasn't projecting the right image to his clients. $500 for a new water heater the year before that. The excuses were always plausible, always urgent. And I always gave it to him. Because I'm his father. And because a foolish part of me thought that my money, the tangible result of my life's labor, could somehow bridge the gap between our worlds. I thought it could buy me a little piece of the son I used to know. It was a pathetic transaction, I know. A father paying for his son's attention. But he was all I had left of Carol, the last piece of the family we had built together. I couldn't bear to lose him completely. Every time the phone rang with his name on the screen, a part of me hoped for the old Kevin to be on the line. But I knew deep down he was only calling for one thing. And that day the call finally came. The phone buzzed on the workbench, rattling against a half-finished mallard. Kevin! My heart did its usual little jump of hope, followed by the familiar thud of reality. I wiped the fine layer of sawdust from my hands onto my jeans and answered, trying to sound casual. Dad! Hey, how are you doing? His voice was bright, energetic. Too bright. It was his salesman voice, the one he used when he was about to pitch an idea or, in my case, ask for a favor. I'm all right, son. Just working on a new decoy. Got a nice piece of basswood. What's on your mind? I tried to engage him, to pull him into my world for just a moment. Oh, that's great, he said, the words quick and dismissive. He didn't ask what kind of duck, or how it was coming along. He just steamrolled ahead. Listen, I'm calling with some annoying news. You know that big dinner we had planned for Saturday? With Tiffany's parents at the Gilded Perch? I did. It was supposed to be a big deal. The first time I'd see his in-laws since Carol's funeral. I'd even thought about getting my old suit dry cleaned, the one I wore to their wedding. Yeah, I remember. What about it? Well, the restaurant completely messed up the reservation. Can you believe it? They double-booked our table, some big corporate party came in. Total incompetence. So we had to cancel. Tiffany is so upset, her mom was really looking forward to it. We're just going to do something quiet at the house instead. Probably just order a pizza or something. Oh, I said, the disappointment a dull ache in my chest. Pizza. That felt about right. That's a shame. I was looking forward to it. But even as I said it, a tiny alarm bell went off in my head. A place like the Gilded Perch, the most exclusive spot in the county, doesn't just mess up a reservation. They have waiting lists months long. It felt thin. He didn't give me time to dwell on it. Yeah, it's a real pain. Anyway, listen, the reason I was really calling. It's a little embarrassing to ask. Here it comes, I thought, bracing myself. We had an unexpected expense come up. The property tax bill was way higher than we anticipated. And we're a little short on the mortgage payment this month. It's just terrible timing. I was wondering if you could possibly float me a loan? Just until my bonus comes through next month. $1,500 should cover it. There it was. The lie then the ask. A 1-2 punch that always left me feeling winded and foolish. $1,500. He said it so casually, like he was asking to borrow a lawnmower. I looked around my workshop at the tools I'd owned for 40 years, at the stacks of lumber I'd paid for with cash. I lived a simple, frugal life. I had savings. Good solid savings I'd earned through decades of hard labor. Savings I had earmarked for my own old age, for emergencies, for a day when I couldn't swing a hammer anymore. To Kevin, it was just a safety net he could dip into whenever his expensive lifestyle outpaced his income. I took a deep breath, the scent of sawdust filling my lungs. All right, son. I'll transfer it over. Oh, Dad, you're a lifesaver. Seriously. I'll pay you back the second that bonus hits. I promise. I hung up the phone, the word promise echoing in the silent room. He'd made that promise a dozen times before. The money was gone. I knew it. I walked inside, opened my banking app and transferred the funds, watching the balance drop. And I have to pause here and ask you honestly, what would you have done in my shoes? When it's your own child, your only child, how do you say no, even when you know you're being played for a fool? Let me know what you think in the comments. I could really use some perspective on this. I thought that was the end of it, just another loan that would never be repaid. I was wrong. It was only the beginning of the deceit. Couple of days went by. The check for $1,500 cleared from my account almost instantly. I tried to push the whole conversation out of my mind, tried to lose myself in the familiar comfort of my workshop. I started work on a particularly tricky piece, a wood duck with its wings half spread, a delicate and challenging pose. But my focus was off. My hands felt clumsy. The conversation with Kevin kept replaying in my head. Total incompetence. We had to cancel. It just didn't sit right. It was a splinter under my skin, a nagging itch I couldn't scratch. The first real tug on that splinter came from the last person I expected, Brenda from across the street. I was out weeding the small flower bed Carol had planted by the mailbox, a small patch of defiant color I tried to keep alive in her memory, when Brenda intercepted me. Her little poodle, which looked like a cotton ball with legs, yapped at her heels. Brenda has a nose for gossip that could rival a bloodhound's, and today she looked like she'd hit the motherlode. Arthur dear, she chirped, her voice a little too loud. I saw your lovely daughter-in-law in town yesterday. Tiffany, isn't it? That's her, I said, trying to get back to my weeding. Just trying to fight off these dandelions. Oh, they're a menace, she agreed, not taking the hint. Well, I was in that fancy wine shop, you know, the Vinter's Selection, next to the post office. I was just picking up a little something for my bridge club, and there she was, looking like she just stepped out of a magazine. And Arthur, you would not believe what she was buying. At least 4 bottles of what looked like very expensive champagne, the kind with the fancy gold foil. She was telling the clerk it was for a very special family celebration. I froze, my hand gripping the weed puller so tightly my knuckles turned white. Champagne. 4 bottles of it. For a very special family celebration. For a quiet night at home with a pizza after a disappointing cancellation? It didn't add up. The numbers were wrong. The story was wrong. I mumbled something non-committal to Brenda about Kevin getting a promotion and retreated into my house, her words replaying in my mind like a broken record. Later that afternoon the phone rang. It was my best friend Hank Riley. Hank and I go way back to grade school. He spent 30 years as a detective with the state police before retiring. He's got a mind like a steel trap, and an uncanny ability to tell when someone's blowing smoke. Art, you still on for fishing this weekend? The trout are biting down at the reservoir, he said, his voice a familiar, gravelly comfort. Wouldn't miss it, Hank. I hesitated for only a second, then decided to confide in him. I needed an outside perspective. I told him the whole story. The call from Kevin, the canceled dinner, the request for money, and what Brenda had just told me about the champagne. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Hank finally spoke, his voice had lost all its earlier cheer. It was the flat, analytical voice of a cop. Art, he said slowly, I've been telling you for years that boy plays you like a fiddle. A canceled reservation at the Gilded Perch? 4 bottles of champagne? A last-minute mortgage crisis? This whole thing smells rotten to high heaven. I know, Hank, but he's my son. It sounded weak even to my own ears. Being your son doesn't give him a license to be a con artist, Hank cut in, his tone sharp but not unkind. Listen to me. Don't say anything to him. Not a word. Just keep your eyes open. A liar always leaves a trail. And this one sounds like he's leaving a trail of breadcrumbs a blind man could follow. Hank's words echoed in my head. Could my own son lie to me so brazenly? I tried to shake it off, but the doubt had taken root. And what happened the next day would make it grow into a tree of pure certainty. The next afternoon, something happened that was so out of the ordinary it should have been a giant flashing red light, the kind you see at a railroad crossing. Kevin's silver SUV, the one I'd helped him make a down payment on, pulled into my driveway. An unannounced visit on a weekday was practically unheard of. He wasn't here for a holiday or a birthday. My heart, the foolish, hopeful thing that it is, fluttered for a moment. Maybe he came to pay me back early. Maybe he felt bad and came to apologize. Maybe he just came to see his old man. He walked in all smiles and energy, carrying a handsome leather-bound folder. Dad, just had a meeting cancel in the area. Thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing. He didn't ask for money. In fact, he said something that stunned me into silence. I was talking to some of the financial guys at our firm, he began, sitting at my kitchen table and opening the folder with a confident snap. And they were telling me about this incredible investment portfolio they have specifically designed for retirees. It's rock solid, Dad. Government bonds, blue chip stocks. It offers a much better return than the measly interest you're getting from the bank. I was thinking about you and your savings. He was thinking about me, my welfare, my future. I was so taken aback, so touched. After years of feeling like an ATM, here he was, my son, the successful businessman, looking out for his father's finances. He seemed so earnest, so genuinely concerned. The doubts from the past few days felt foolish, the suspicions of a lonely old man. He spread a sheaf of papers across the table. They were filled with charts, graphs, and fine print that swam before my eyes. He spoke a language I didn't understand, using words like diversification, asset management, and liquidity. He made it sound so professional, so secure. Look at these projections, he said, tapping a complex-looking graph. It's a no-brainer. All you have to do is sign a few authorization forms here, and we can get the process started. It allows my firm's advisors to manage a portion of your savings for you, to make your money work for you. I felt a swell of pride. This was my boy. Smart. Successful. The first Miller to graduate from college. And he was using that success, that knowledge to help me. It felt like the gap between our worlds was finally closing. The thing is, he said, pulling a fancy pen from his pocket, the window to get into this particular fund closes at the end of the week. It's very popular. We'd have to get these signed and notarized today to make the deadline. The urgency seemed reasonable. These things always have deadlines. He made it sound like he was doing me a huge favor getting me in under the wire. I looked at his eager face, so full of confidence. This was the son I had sent to college. This was the man I had helped time and time again. How could I doubt him now when he was finally trying to give back? My old rule, the one Carol and I always lived by, never sign anything you haven't read, evaporated in the warmth of his sudden attention. I felt a little embarrassed to admit I didn't understand the jargon. I didn't want to look foolish in front of my accomplished son, so I just nodded. He pointed to the lines, a reassuring smile on his face. Just here and initial here. Picked up the pen. The ink flowed smoothly onto the page. I signed my name, my full name, Arthur Miller, on 3 separate pages. My signature, the same one I'd used to sign the deed to this house, the same one on my marriage license with Carol. A signature built on a lifetime of trust and honest work. He left with a smile, the papers tucked under his arm. I felt a surge of pride, thinking my son was finally looking out for me. Little did I know I hadn't just signed some investment forms. I had just handed him the keys to my entire life. That feeling of pride lasted less than 24 hours. It was a warm, fragile thing that shattered the moment reality set in. The next evening I couldn't shake a deep-seated unease. The whole thing, the canceled dinner, the champagne, the sudden visit, the rush to sign papers I didn't understand, it was all swirling in my gut like sour milk. Brenda's gossip, Hank's warning, my own intuition, it was all screaming at me. On a whim, I decided to drive into town. I told myself I needed to pick up some sandpaper for a new project, but that was a lie. I knew where I was really going. I parked my old Ford pickup a block away from the Gilded Perch, in the shadow of the old bank building. The restaurant was lit up, glowing like a jewel box against the twilight sky. It looked like a picture from a magazine, a world away from my simple life. And sitting right out front, impossible to miss under the bright valet lights, was Kevin's gleaming silver SUV. My breath caught in my throat. He was here. He was here on the very Saturday night the dinner was supposedly cancelled for. The lie wasn't a suspicion anymore. It wasn't a bad feeling. It was a fact, a 5,000-pound piece of metal and glass parked right in front of me. I felt a hot flush of anger, so intense it made me dizzy, followed by a cold, heavy wave of hurt that settled deep in my bones. I reached for my phone, my fingers fumbling with the screen, and dialed the only person I knew would understand. Hank? It's Art. You were right. You were right about everything. He's here. My voice was raspy, tight with emotion. Stay put. Hank's voice was calm and steady, a rock in my churning sea of confusion. Don't move. Don't go in there. Don't confront him. I'm 10 minutes away. True to his word, Hank's sensible sedan pulled up beside my truck a few minutes later. He got into my passenger seat, his presence immediately calming my frayed nerves. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just looked at the restaurant, his expression grim. "Okay," he said, his eyes scanning the scene like he was back on the job. "Let's just watch." We didn't have to wait long. Through the large, elegant front window of the restaurant we saw them. The whole party. Kevin, looking proud as a peacock in a fancy suit, holding his wine glass aloft. Tiffany, sparkling in a black dress, laughing at something he said. And an older, distinguished-looking couple who had to be her parents, looking perfectly at ease in the opulent surroundings. They were all laughing, raising their wine glasses for a toast. There was no cancelled reservation. There was no quiet dinner at home with pizza. There was just a celebration. A celebration that I was not only excluded from, but one that I had undoubtedly paid for with my mortgage money. The sight of it, the blatant, joyful deception, was like a physical blow. It knocked the wind right out of me. Watching them celebrate in that restaurant, so happy and carefree, felt like a physical blow. The lie was real, but I had to know more. I had to know what they were saying about me. And Hank, with his old cop instincts, had a plan. "There's no way we'll hear anything from out here," Hank said, his gaze fixed on the happy family framed in the window like a cruel painting. "And if you go in there looking like you do now, they'll spot you a mile away." He was right. My face felt like a thundercloud, and my flannel shirt suddenly felt coarse and out of place. My mind was racing, a chaotic mess of anger and hurt. I wanted to storm in there, to turn their table over, to demand answers. I wanted them to see the pain they had caused. Hank put a calming hand on my shoulder. His touch was firm, grounding. "Easy, Art. We don't go in guns blazing. That's what they'd expect. We get intel first. We need to know what we're up against." He thought for a moment, the old detective's mind clicking into gear, his eyes narrowing. "Here's what you're going to do. I've seen this work 100 times. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was a retired carpenter, not a spy. And what's that, Hank? You're going to walk in there calm as can be. Go straight to the host. You're going to tell him you have a reservation for Miller. When he can't find it, act confused and say you must have the wrong night, and that you need to use the restroom before you leave. The restrooms are always in the back, past the tables. No one will question you." It sounded insane, but I trusted Hank more than I trusted myself right then. "And then what?" "On your way back from the restroom," Hank said, his eyes glinting in the dim light of the truck's cabin, "you're going to have a little accident. When you get near their table, you're going to trip, just a little stumble forward. And your keys are going to fly out of your hand and slide under their table." I looked at him confused. "My keys?" "Your keys," he confirmed with a firm nod. "You apologize profusely, say you're a clumsy old fool. Then you get down on one knee to retrieve them. That'll buy you 10, maybe 15 seconds of audio. People say the darndest things when they think no one is listening. Just listen. Then get up, thank them, and walk right out the door. Don't look back." It felt like something out of a spy movie, but my anger was stronger than my fear. I took a deep breath, got out of the truck, and walked towards the restaurant's ornate entrance. My hands were sweating, but my resolve was like steel. I followed the plan perfectly. The host was dismissive, just as Hank predicted. The trip to the restroom gave me a clear view of their table. On the way back, as I passed them, I caught my foot on the leg of an empty chair. I stumbled and my keys clattered across the polished floor, sliding to a stop right next to Tiffany's expensive-looking shoes. Oh my goodness. I am so sorry, folks. So clumsy of me. I mumbled, my face burning with fake embarrassment as I knelt down. And then I heard it. The voices, clear as a bell in my 15-second window of espionage. And the best part is he actually believes I'll pay him back from my bonus, Kevin was saying, and the table erupted in a wave of condescending laughter. My blood ran cold. He's so wonderfully simple, Tiffany's mother, a woman with a face like a porcelain doll, chimed in with a delicate little laugh. Then Tiffany's voice, dripping with disdain. You should see the little wooden ducks he carves in that dusty shed of his. He thinks they're art. Quaint. But honestly a bit pathetic. Her father, a man with a booming voice, added, well, his simple-mindedness is funding this excellent Cabernet, so I say, bless the old carpenter. Carpenter. They didn't even know what I did for a living. I grabbed my keys, the metal digging into my palm. My entire life, my skills, my grief, my love for my son. It was all just a joke to them. A punchline over a fine meal. I picked up my keys, my hand shaking with rage. Every word was a dagger in my heart. They weren't just lying to me, they were laughing at me. As I walked out of that restaurant into the cold night air, I knew one thing. This wasn't over. They had started a war. I stumbled out of the gilded perch, the sound of their laughter echoing in my ears, and collapsed into the passenger seat of my truck. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, the air knocked out of my lungs. Hank didn't have to ask what I'd heard. The look on my face, a mask of pure, unadulterated pain and fury, said it all. I repeated the words to him, each one feeling like ash in my mouth. Simple-minded. Pathetic. Bless the old carpenter. Hank listened in stony silence, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel of my old Ford. When I was finished, he didn't offer empty condolences or tell me it would be okay. He just nodded slowly, his expression grim and hard as granite. Okay, he said, his voice low and dangerous. That's it. That's the line. We drove back to my house, the silence in the truck thick with unspoken fury. I felt hollowed out, a shell of a man. The love I had for my son, the love I had clung to so desperately for 4 years, had been replaced by a cold, hard knot of betrayal. When we got inside, I just sank into my old armchair, the one Carol always said was molded perfectly to my shape, and stared blankly at the wall where her picture hung. What would she think of her boy now? Hank went to the kitchen and came back with 2 glasses and a bottle of my best whiskey, the one I saved for special occasions like anniversaries or Christmas. He poured 2 generous measures, the amber liquid catching the light. This, he said, handing me a glass, is a special occasion. This is the night you start fighting back. The whiskey burned a welcome trail down my throat. He sat across from me in Carol's old chair. Art, listen to me. This isn't just a family squabble anymore. This isn't about a son being a disrespectful jerk. What you heard in there, combined with everything else, this is fraud. Plain and simple. He's been systematically conning you out of your retirement savings, probably for years. The word conning hit me hard. It was ugly, clinical, and undeniably true. My son was a con artist, and I was his primary victim. And I'll bet you my pension, Hank continued, leaning forward, his voice intense, that it doesn't stop with the $1,500. That story about the mortgage? The investment papers you signed yesterday? My gut is screaming that there's something much bigger and much dirtier going on here. He didn't go to all this trouble for pocket change. He's after the whole damn pot. He was right. The sick feeling in my stomach intensified, churning with a mixture of dread and rage. Those papers. I had signed them without a second thought, blinded by a moment of foolish hope. What had I done? What had I given him the power to do? We can't go to the police with just a story about an overheard conversation and a hunch, Hank said, his mind already working the angles, the detective in him taking over completely. They'll call it a civil matter, a family dispute. We need proof. Hard, undeniable proof. And that starts with those papers you signed. Do you have a copy? Any idea what they were called? I shook my head numbly, shame washing over me. No. I didn't even read them, Hank. I just signed. He took the whole folder with him. Hank's jaw tightened. Of course he did. Okay. New plan. Tomorrow morning first thing you and I are going to the bank. And then we're going to the county records office. If he's done something with your name or your property, there's going to be a paper trail. And I know exactly how to find it. Hank looked at me, his eyes sharp and clear. We're not going to get mad, Art, he said. We're going to get even. And we're going to start by looking at every single piece of paper your son has ever asked you to sign. And what we found was worse than I could have ever imagined. The next morning felt like walking through a fog. Sleep had been a stranger, replaced by a looping reel of my son's laughter and Tiffany's sneering voice. Hank picked me up at 8 a.m. sharp, his face set with a grim determination that gave me a sliver of strength. Our first stop was my bank, the same local branch where I'd had an account since I was 16 and had my first summer job. I sat down with the branch manager, a kind woman named Mrs. Gable who had helped Carol and me with our first mortgage decades ago. Her smile faltered when she saw the look on my face. With Hank by my side, I explained that I had some concerns about recent activity and documents I had signed under potentially false pretenses. The trust I'd had in my own son had been shattered, and now I was trusting a near stranger to help me pick up the pieces. Mrs. Gable typed quietly at her computer for a few minutes, her brow furrowing deeper with each click of the mouse. The silence in her small office was deafening. Finally, she turned the screen towards me, her expression a mixture of pity and professional concern. Mr. Miller, she said gently, I see the transfer of $1,500 to your son's account 2 days ago. But there's another much larger transaction that was processed yesterday morning. My blood turned to ice. My hands resting on my knees started to tremble. What transaction? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. A wire transfer for $50,000 was made from your primary savings account to an external investment firm called Prestige Asset Holdings. $50,000. The number didn't seem real. It was a sound, not a value. That was a huge chunk of my life savings. It was the money Carol and I had put away for rainy days, for a comfortable old age, for the possibility of helping grandchildren we never had. Gone. Just like that. The authorization form was signed by you and it was notarized, she added, showing me a scanned copy on the screen. There was my signature, clear as day, on the document Kevin had called an investment opportunity. The notary stamp was from a service in the city, dated the same day Kevin had visited. He must have gone straight there after leaving my house. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The room started to spin. Hank took over, his voice a steady anchor in my swirling panic. Mrs. Gable, can you please print all of this for us? Every document related to that transfer, the authorization, the receiving account information, everything. Our next stop was the county recorder's office, a dusty, quiet building downtown. Hank knew exactly what to look for, navigating the public computer system with an expert's efficiency. He pulled up the records for my property, the house I was sitting in, the 2 acres of land I had cleared myself all those years ago. And there it was, filed electronically just yesterday afternoon. A second mortgage lien. For $50,000. The lender was a private equity firm I'd never heard of. The borrower was me, Arthur Miller, by way of my power of attorney, Kevin Miller. He hadn't just taken my savings. He had used the power of attorney I'd foolishly signed to borrow against the very home I had built, the home that held all my memories of Carol. He had put my entire life on the line for his own greed. But Hank wasn't done. On the drive back, he made a call. Yeah, Jim, it's Hank Riley. Listen, I'm calling in a big one. He spoke to a friend of his, a senior agent at the IRS, explaining the situation in clipped professional tones. What his friend found later that day was the final nail in the coffin. For the past 5 years, Kevin had been claiming me as a dependent and filing for thousands of dollars in medical and elder care tax credits, for expenses that never existed. He wasn't just stealing from me. He was stealing from the government, using my name as his shield. $50,000. A lien on my house. Years of tax fraud. He had stolen my home from right under my nose. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about my life, my legacy, my wife's memory. At that moment, any hesitation I had vanished. They deserved everything that was coming to them. Armed with a mountain of damning evidence, bank statements showing the transfer, official county records of the fraudulent mortgage lien, and preliminary information on the tax fraud, Hank and I met with the local police department, and the IRS agent his friend had connected us with. The meeting took place in a small sterile room that smelled of stale coffee. I laid the papers out on the table, my hand shaking slightly. Each document was a testament to my son's betrayal. It was no longer a family matter. It was a criminal investigation. The lead detective, a sharp woman named Sanchez, listened intently, her expression hardening with every detail I provided. The IRS agent, a no-nonsense man named Peterson, looked at the tax documents and just shook his head in disgust. They assured me they had more than enough to proceed. The wheels of justice started turning, but they turned slowly. There would be warrants, subpoenas, and eventually an arrest. But a quiet arrest and a plea bargain didn't feel like justice to me. Not after the public humiliation, not after hearing them laugh at me. I wanted more. I wanted them to be exposed. I wanted the world they cared so much about, the world of appearances, of status, of fancy restaurants, to see them for who they truly were. And so we devised a plan. A final act. A trap. Detective Sanchez was hesitant at first, preferring a standard warrant service, but Hank, the old-school cop, managed to persuade her. Let the man have his moment, he'd argued. Let the punishment fit the crime. It was the hardest phone call I've ever had to make. I had to swallow my rage, bury my pain, and put on the performance of a lifetime. I rehearsed it with Hank, trying to get the tone just right, the voice of a slightly confused but eager old man, the perfect mark. I dialed Kevin's number, my heart pounding a heavy, painful rhythm against my ribs. He answered on the second ring, his voice wary, probably wondering if I'd noticed the $50,000 missing yet. Dad? Everything okay? Everything's great, son. Better than great, I said, forcing a cheerful, slightly breathless tone I didn't feel. In fact, I was calling to thank you. I spoke with my banker about that investment you set up, and he said it's a fantastic opportunity. A real home run. Said I was lucky to get in on it. There was a pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the relief washing over him. The old fool had bought it. Oh, wow. That's great, Dad. I told you it was a sure thing. Those guys at my firm, they're the best. You did, and you were right, I said. And I was thinking I've been too cautious with my money. I'd like to invest more. A lot more. But it's a big decision, and I'd like to go over the details with you and Tiffany in person. How about we celebrate our new venture? My treat. Let's go to that place you like so much. The Gilded Perch. We can have a nice dinner and talk business. Silence. He was stunned. He probably couldn't believe his luck. The naive old fool was coming back for another shearing. The Gilded Perch, he repeated, a note of pure avarice in his voice. Dad, that's really generous. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said, the words tasting like poison. I want to experience the kind of place my successful son enjoys. Friday night. Say 7 p.m. We'll be there, he said, the greed practically dripping from his voice. This is great, Dad. Really great. I'll bring some new prospectuses. I hung up and looked at Hank. He just gave me a slow, grim nod. The bait was set. The trap was ready. Look, I know this has been a long and heavy story. And if you've stuck with me this far, it truly means the world to me. You're not just a viewer. You're a witness to this whole ordeal. If you're still here, do me a favor and just type the number 1 in the comments so I know you're on this journey with me. It helps more than you know. Okay, let's get back to it. He took the bait, just as Hank predicted he would. The reservation was made. The stage was set at the very scene of my humiliation. They were walking into the lion's den, completely unaware that I was the one who held the key to the cage. Friday night arrived with a cold, clear sky, the kind where the stars look like chips of ice. I didn't wear my old suit. That suit belonged to a different man, a man who believed in his son. Instead, I put on my work clothes, a clean pair of denim jeans, a freshly laundered flannel shirt that smelled of laundry soap and sawdust, and my sturdy scuffed work boots. This was who I was. A carpenter. A man who worked with his hands. I wanted them to see me, really see me one last time. I got to the Gilded Perch early. The same snooty host from the other night gave me a disdainful once-over, his eyes lingering on my boots, but my name was on the reservation, so he had to lead me to my table. I had requested it specifically. A large, prominent one right in the center of the dining room. It was perfect. A stage. A few minutes later, Hank walked in with detectives Allen and Sanchez, all in plain clothes. They looked like any other group of professionals out for a Friday night dinner. They took a table in the corner with a clear line of sight to mine, ordered coffee, and blended in perfectly. At 7 p.m. sharp, Kevin and Tiffany made their grand entrance. He was in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my first car. She was in a glittering dress, dripping with jewelry that caught the light and threw it around the room. They looked like royalty scanning the room for me. Their faces fell for a fraction of a second when they saw me in my simple clothes, a flicker of embarrassment in their eyes. But the thought of another big payday quickly plastered the smiles back on their faces. "Dad," Kevin boomed, putting on a show for the other diners, his voice full of false warmth. "So glad you could make it." Tiffany air-kissed my cheek, her expensive perfume cloying and sweet. "Arthur, it's so wonderful to see you embracing the finer things in life." The condescension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. We sat. They immediately ordered the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu, charging it to the room without even asking me. They launched into a monologue about their lives, about their upcoming trip to Italy, the new renovations on their kitchen, the importance of summering in the right places. It was a performance of wealth and status, and I was meant to be the captivated audience. I just nodded along, a quiet old man seemingly in awe of their glamorous world, letting them dig their own graves deeper with every boastful word. Then, after the main course was cleared, Kevin opened his expensive leather briefcase. "Okay, Dad, let's talk business," he said, his eyes gleaming with a predator's light. He started laying out more glossy brochures, filled with the same confusing charts and graphs as before. He talked about a second-tier investment that required an even larger initial deposit, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get in on the ground floor of some new tech company. I let him finish his whole spiel. I watched him, my son, lie to my face with such ease, such practiced charm. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was a shark that smelled blood in the water. He saw me not as his father, but as a mark, a resource to be drained dry until nothing was left. When he was done, I didn't look at the papers. I pushed them aside gently. I took a slow sip of my water, letting the glass clink softly as I set it down. I looked him straight in the eye, and let the silence hang in the air for a long, uncomfortable moment. The whole table grew quiet. A flicker of annoyance crossed Kevin's face. He wanted to get straight to the money. "Questions? About what, Dad?" he asked impatiently. I took another slow sip of water, looked him dead in the eye and said, "About the $50,000 you stole from my house." The effect of my words was instantaneous and devastating. It was as if I'd pulled the pin on a grenade and rolled it onto the pristine white tablecloth. The color drained from Kevin's face, leaving it a pasty, sickly white. Tiffany's perfectly painted smile froze, cracked, and then shattered completely. What?" Kevin stammered, his confident facade crumbling into dust. "Dad, I think you're confused. We talked about this. That was an investment for your future." "Stop." I said it quietly, but my voice cut through the restaurant's soft music like a saw blade hitting a nail. The couple at the next table paused their conversation and looked over. "The lying stops now. Tonight. Right here." I kept my voice low, but it was filled with all the cold fury I had been bottling up for weeks. I leaned forward slightly. "I know about the dinner, Kevin. The one that was canceled. I was here. I was standing right over there." I gestured towards the spot where I had knelt to pick up my keys. "I heard you all laughing. Laughing at your simple-minded father. Laughing at the man whose life savings were paying for your wine." Tiffany gasped, a strangled little sound, her hand flying to her throat. Her eyes darted around the room, suddenly terrified of who might be watching. "I know about the tax fraud," I continued, my gaze unwavering, pinning Kevin to his seat. "Claiming thousands of dollars for my care for the last 5 years. A nice little bonus for you, wasn't it? While I was here alone, fixing my own roof and paying my own bills." Kevin was speechless, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He looked at Tiffany, pleading with his eyes, but she just stared at me, her face a mask of pure horror. "But that wasn't enough, was it?" My voice finally cracked with the raw pain of it. "That wasn't enough, so you had to come from my home. The home I built for your mother. I pointed a trembling finger at him. You tricked me. You had me sign papers you knew I wouldn't understand. You put a $50,000 mortgage on my house. Her house. The word house hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Did you think I wouldn't find out? I asked, my voice rising slightly. Did you really think I was that stupid? That pathetic? I threw her own word back at her, and Tiffany flinched as if I'd slapped her. This is a misunderstanding. Kevin finally managed to get out, his voice rising in panic. He looked around wildly, suddenly aware that the entire restaurant was now watching our table in dead silence. We can sort this out, Dad. This is a private family matter. It's a little late for that, son, I said, my voice dropping back to a cold, calm tone. It stopped being a family matter the moment you committed multiple felonies. And right on cue, as if summoned by my words, Hank and the two detectives stood up from their corner table. They walked over, calm and deliberate, their presence shifting the entire atmosphere of the restaurant from curious to official. Kevin Miller? Tiffany Miller, Hank said, his voice the official, no-nonsense tone of a cop. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. He just gestured to the two detectives beside him. This is Detective Allen and Detective Sanchez. They have a few questions for you down at the station. Questions? About what? Tiffany shrieked, her composure completely gone, her voice shrill and ugly. Detective Allen unfolded a piece of paper and read from it in a clear, unwavering voice. You are both under arrest on suspicion of grand larceny, bank fraud, and forgery. The entire restaurant fell silent. All eyes were on us. As the handcuffs clicked shut on their wrists, Tiffany started screaming, not in remorse but in anger. And the first person she turned on was her own husband. You did this. Tiffany shrieked, her voice a piercing, ugly sound that made people at other tables jump. She wasn't looking at me, the man whose life she had helped ruin. She was glaring at Kevin, her face a twisted mask of fury and betrayal. This was your stupid, greedy idea. He'll never know, Tiff. He's too old and naive to check his own bank statements. You told me that. You promised me we wouldn't get caught. Kevin, his face ashen as Detective Sanchez cuffed his hands behind his back, looked at her with pure, unadulterated shock. The spell was broken. The united front had crumbled. Me? You're the one who was complaining we didn't have enough for the trip to Tuscany. You're the one who picked out the $30,000 marble for the kitchen. Don't you dare try to put this all on me. You were in on it from the start. I never knew about the house, she screamed back, tears of rage, not sorrow, streaming down her face, leaving black trails of mascara. I would have never agreed to the house. Their ugly, venomous argument played out for everyone to see. The perfect, polished couple, stripped bare under the bright lights of the fancy restaurant, revealing the rot and greed underneath. They clawed at each other with words, each one desperately trying to shove the other deeper into the hole they had dug together. There was no love there. No loyalty. Just two greedy people caught in their own trap, turning on each other like cornered rats. It was a pathetic spectacle, and I felt a profound, bone-deep sadness watching it. The detectives led them away, a whimpering, hysterical Tiffany and a stunned, silent Kevin, through the gawking crowd of diners. People were openly filming with their phones now. Their public humiliation was complete. The restaurant manager rushed over, his face pale, apologizing profusely, saying my entire bill was on the house. I hadn't eaten a single bite of my main course. Hank came back to the table and sat down heavily in the chair Kevin had just vacated. The restaurant was buzzing with whispers, but our table was an island of surreal silence. The adrenaline that had been pumping through my veins for the past hour drained away, leaving behind a vast, gaping emptiness. I had won. Justice had been served in the most public way possible. But there was no triumph, no satisfaction. Just a hollow ache where a son used to be. I had exposed a criminal, but in doing so, I had lost my child forever. The boy I had taught to fish, the boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, was gone. In his place was a stranger in handcuffs, a man who saw his own father as nothing more than a mark. It's over, Art, Hank said quietly, his voice full of a gentle understanding that only a true friend who had seen the worst of humanity could offer. I nodded, staring at the half-eaten, ridiculously expensive chocolate dessert on Tiffany's plate. It was over. But the finality of it was crushing. I had cut out the cancer, but the surgery had left a massive, gaping wound right in the center of my life. But what came next? How do you rebuild a life when the foundation has been shattered by your own blood? The weeks that followed were a blur of legal proceedings. Lawyers, depositions, victim impact statements. It was an ugly, soul-crushing process. Hank was with me every step of the way. A steady presence in the chaos. The evidence was overwhelming. A mountain of paper that told a simple, sordid story of greed and betrayal. Faced with it, Kevin and Tiffany took a plea deal. They avoided a long prison sentence, but they were hit with heavy fines, years of probation, and a felony record that would follow them for the rest of their lives. They had to sell their fancy house in the city and the silver SUV to pay back the bank and the IRS. They lost everything they had built on a foundation of lies. I never heard from them directly again. Not a letter of apology, not a call of remorse. Nothing. Just silence. The second mortgage on my house was cleared. The stolen money from my savings was eventually returned, but it felt tainted. On paper I was made whole. But the hole in my heart was another matter entirely. For a while I just existed. I'd wake up, drink my coffee, and stare out the window at the changing leaves. The workshop, my former sanctuary, felt alien and cold. The tools felt heavy and useless in my hands. The joy, the simple, honest pleasure of creation was gone. What was the point of building anything when something you'd spent a lifetime building, a family, could be destroyed so easily? One afternoon, Hank came over and found me just sitting in the dark, dusty workshop. He didn't say much. He just dragged a stool over, sat down, and started talking. He told me about old cases, about his late wife, about the best bait for catching bass in the fall. He didn't try to cheer me up. He just filled the silence. He came back the next day and the day after that. Slowly, very slowly, a flicker of something returned. I picked up a block of basswood one morning. It felt foreign in my hands. I didn't think. I just started to carve. The motions were stiff at first, then more familiar. And as the shavings fell to the floor, curling at my feet, I felt a piece of the immense weight lift from my shoulders. I wasn't carving for anyone else. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just doing it for me. For the simple, honest pleasure of creating something with my own two hands. I finished that duck, a pintail with its head turned back, and it was the best one I had ever made. I poured all my pain, all my anger, and all my grief into the fine details of its feathers. And then I made another. And another. My workshop became my sanctuary again. But this time it wasn't a place to hide from the world. It was a place to heal, a place to rebuild myself sliver by sliver. A few months later, on a whim, I took some of my best pieces to a regional craft fair Hank had told me about. A man in a tweed jacket who owned a prestigious art gallery in the city saw my work. He spent a long time looking at my ducks, turning them over in his hands. He said they had character, soul. He bought my entire collection on the spot. The check he wrote was for more money than I had seen in a long time. But it wasn't the money that mattered. It was the feeling that my work, my skill, something that was purely mine, had value. I stood on the edge of the Grand Canyon, something Carol and I always dreamed of doing, and I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I had lost a son, but in a way I had found myself again. And I realized the most important lesson of all. That trip to the Grand Canyon, paid for with the money from my carvings, changed me. Standing there, looking out at something so vast and timeless, carved by forces of nature over millions of years, I realized how small my own problems were in the grand scheme of things. My pain was real, my betrayal was deep, but it wasn't the end of my story. It was just the end of a chapter. A painful, ugly chapter to be sure, but one that was now closed. The future was a blank page, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the strength to start writing on it again. The most important lesson I learned through all of this is something Carol used to say in her simple, wise way. Family isn't always about blood. Blood can betray you. Blood can lie to you. Blood can break your heart in ways you never thought possible. True family are the people who show up when your world falls apart. My family was Hank, sitting with me in the dark workshop when I couldn't speak, knowing that silence was the only language I understood at that moment. My family was Mrs. Gable at the bank, who treated a shaken old man with kindness and respect when I was at my most vulnerable. Family is about loyalty, honesty, and showing up, especially when it's hard. I'm sharing my story today, as painful as it is to relive, because I know deep down that I'm not the only one who has gone through something like this. The world can be a tough place, and sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. But your worth is not defined by how others treat you. Your worth comes from your own integrity, your own hard work, and the goodness in your own heart. Don't ever let anyone take that away from you. Your dignity is a fortress, and you are its only gatekeeper. Don't hand the keys over to anyone who doesn't deserve your trust. This was my story. It was painful, but it was necessary. And now I want to hear from you. Have any of you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with all your heart? It doesn't have to be a child. It could be a friend, a partner, a sibling. How did you find the strength to move on and rebuild? Share your stories in the comments below. You never know who might be reading, who might need to hear that they are not alone. Let's support each other and build a community right here. And please, if my story resonated with you, if it touched you in any way, do this old carpenter a favor and give this video a like. It helps more people find these stories. And be sure to subscribe to the channel for more true stories about finding justice, healing, and rebuilding your life from the ground up. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening.